Hi, and welcome to Comic Style Coloring the Spawn Way. I'm going to take you through a Spawn cover I did a couple of years ago that's always been a personal favorite. And I'm going to take you through every step from scanning, flatting, to final coloring. If you guys are already good on your scanning and your flatting, please feel free to skip ahead. But a lot of people have been asking me for the whole package, so that's what we're going to do. I have an 11 by 17 scanner. It's an Epson 1640 XL, I believe, and I'm very happy with it. But let me step back for a second. Most original art for comic books is done on 11 by 17 boards. That's why it's nice to have an 11 by 17 scanner. But most people don't want to shell out the money for 11 by 17 scanner. And for years, when I was first starting to do this stuff, I scanned on 8.5 by 11 scanners and just pieced them together. The trick is when you do that, just make sure you scan with a little bit of overlap. It'll make it easier for you to put the halves together. But that's a fine way of doing it as well. And you can get scanners that are practically state of the art 5 years ago. Today, they're brand new, for $99 and stuff. So, I also have the small version of my 1640, which is a great scanner as well. So, I'm going to scan in grayscale, and I'm not going to let the scanner decide much for me. I like making these decisions myself. I mean, you could scan in black and white bitmap mode and let the scanner make a lot of decisions, but I'd rather have some control with levels and such, and I think you get a better scan at the end of the day. So anyway, I'm just going to go do a raw grayscale scan. If you have stuff too that's very fine or kind of stubborn for you to scan, I would suggest scanning it even in RGB and then do your levels and retouch a little bit and then get it to grayscale if you have to, or black and white if you have to, because you just have more information to work with. Okay, this is again pretty much what the original art looks like. Um, you'll see there's some stray pencil marks and color note. Todd had in mind some shafts of light coming down, and he wanted to indicate to me where those would be. Um, for your first step in cleaning up a scan, get a little closer so you can see what's kind of going on, see what you're losing, see what you're keeping. And go ahead and go to levels. Fill in your black so you can see that your black areas are nice and black. And then pull in the white areas till you see most of those pencil marks going away. And you don't want to do too much. See, if I go too far, it gets a little too thin on us. This looks pretty good. Again, I'll just do a quick loop around to make sure I'm not missing anything. And we hit OK at that point. Now, if I notice there are some little bits of stuff, I'll use the dodge and burn tool on highlights to get rid of, further kind of use it like an eraser and get rid of little stray pencil marks if I see any. Nope, I don't see any. Now, if you want to, I'll zoom in a little closer. This is a trick that sometimes is useful, though I gotta tell you, this new scanner is really picking up all the detail very nicely for me. But in case your scanner doesn't, something to try is to go in and use an unsharp mask. About the settings I have here are pretty good. Say OK. So you can see the before and after. Really, again, this scan was pretty darn good, but you can still sharpens it up just a little bit. I'm not going to do it on this, but I just wanted to show it to you guys in case you want to use it as a trick to bring out a little more detail in your scans. Alright, I'm going to go to the pencil tool just to clean up some other stray little things real quick. And Todd's note to put in cool sky and lighting effect. I'll remember that. Okay. Now I've talked before about most scans for most color work are just purely black and white, which means bitmap. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If we're going real close here, you'll see there's shades of gray in this line art. Okay. Now what we're going to do is mode change this to bitmap. We want to keep it the same DPI that we scanned it at and use a 50% threshold method. If we don't use 50% threshold, then we'll get dot patterns or basically our other options, and we don't want to do that. We just want black and white, black where the ink lines are and white where the paper was. So I'll do OK. And now you can see that the gray is gone. I'll undo it. See? With gray, without gray, with gray, without gray. Okay. Now let's go ahead and save this because this is going to be our line art. And we want to keep our line art nice and high res and clean for us to grab later, because we're not going to color at 300 dpi because that would be too much of a strain on most machines. We don't need to color that high res because most color is screened and isn't necessarily reproduced at the high resolution that line art is. That's why we keep the line art separate until we're ready to res back up our color. So I'm going to res this down, but I'm going to convert it to grayscale first so I can have it look smooth. If I resize down the bitmap and then copy it over to an RGB, it will look all stair-stepped when I bring it back down in size. So that's all fine with one. Now I'm going to image size it. And I'm going to go ahead and color this at 150 dpi. Yeah, let's cover. Let's make it 200 dpi. Interiors, if they're 11 by 17, I don't mind coloring them at 150. It usually works out just fine. For covers, and sometimes they run at higher line screen, I'll go ahead and color those either at same size, 300 or 200. But because this tutorial can only go so long, I need to have a little bit of speed on my side. All right. This is our lower res version. Now I'm going to convert it again to RGB color. Color in RGB. I'm going to select all. And I'm going to Control or Command cut that file out, add another layer. On that new layer, I'm going to paste it back in. I'm going to set it into multiply mode. Okay, so our background layer is going to be what I'm going to color on. Our top layer is in multiply mode, and what that means by having it in multiply mode is, let me just put in some big broad brush strokes of color. If I start coloring, you can see the color, but it doesn't block out the line art. Okay. So now we're going to do the next step. flats, which again people have asked me for. Flats are basically, you're going to fill each part, like from the mask, Spawn's costume color, the wings, each separate part like that is going to be a different basic color. So it'll be easier for you to magic wand the area if you need to rework or change a color for an art director or for an editor, or even just simply experiment more as you're working with the piece. And you'll keep the flats after you do them either in a channel or another layer, so they're always there for you to go back to pick at. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to start the flats, and then I'm going to do an easy bake oven thing. So I already have some flats that I've finished. So I'm on the background layer. I usually like my flats to be sort of monochromatic, so I'm going to kind of do a cool gray thing here. First thing, I'm going to fill the whole thing with color. Pick a color, fill it. Sort of like a painterly thing, just thinking of toning the canvas. And then with the lasso tool, very important, lasso tool is not anti-aliased and there's no feathering on it. The reason why, because if you go back to with your magic wand to pick an area that has an anti-alias line, you'll get a halo between whatever the color is you're picking and whatever the color is beside it, and you don't want that. So anyway, you just go in with the lasso tool, and I'll hold the Alt key so I can pick up and it anchors it, but I still have my free drawing. And I'm just going in and I'm basically selecting the whole area of the wing, and I'm going to fill it with one solid color. I should say one flat solid color. Doesn't matter if I go into Spawn at this point, because I'm going to basically you work from background to foreground when you do flats, and since Spawn's in front of the wings, I'm going to go right over what I'm doing here anyway. Okay, I'm going to pick a little bit of a lighter color for these, and I did Alt Delete and that filled with foreground color. And you just continue like this. It's like tracing. It basically is tracing an outline of the piece you're doing. We flat not only so we can change things, but also since we do color in a sort of assembly line fashion, we have flatters who exclusively do flats for our colorists, and that allows them to really get in there and attack pages very quickly. Because we do have so many pages that we color. We have about 16 books a month or so that come through the studio for just color. Alright. Almost done with the wing. All right. And basically I have all the wing done. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Remember to save. I'm going to keep the compatibility maximized because I'm sure there'll be some people, because this file will be included on the CD, and I'm sure there's be some people who run some older Photoshops who want to open it, and that's the reason why you would have maximized compatibility on. If you just worry about Photoshop 7, then you don't have it on, and it will give you smaller file sizes. Okay, now the next bit, let's do all spawn. I'm also coloring at 800 by 600, so as my producer tells me, it will run better on most people's machines. So you'll notice my Photoshop is a little cramped. I normally like working at minimum 1024 by 768, and the higher res, the better. You notice some little holes in some of the blacks. That's not even bad scanning, that's because they did some splatter on this piece, and I'll show that to you when we get over there. And again, we're just getting all the spawns, figure in general. See down here, the splatter's real heavy because Todd made him actually disappear into the splatter. So I'm just going to go loose down there because I'm going to fade off the color and fade off this line work down at the bottom when I'm done. Again, holding down the Alt key so I can have an anchored lasso as I'm also just drawing, so in case you get tired or whatever. Almost there. Alright, and pick a fairly dark color for spawn. Do his face mask over here. Don't worry about flattening when you go into a big black area, because it doesn't matter if you go into it because there's going to be black on top of the color. So. And you go for a lighter color. Eyes. His big forearm pieces that are red. Now I'm going to go ahead and go off here, go into the hand. And see how I'm going to have a tolerance when I do. I'll go ahead and use the bucket tool here, and I'll have a tolerance on 0. Tolerance on 0. Thank you. And pick a nice dark red, and I'll bucket fill it. Oops. It's using all layers. And there it stops. See? Even though this was lassoed all the way out here, it stopped at the lighter color. And that's handy, so I didn't have to like trace that edge or anything. Go over here, do the same. Let the bracer start about up here. It goes over this part of the hand. Again, bucket fill. There we go. I got spikes to do, and then I'm basically done with the flats for this. It's a pretty easy piece of braid, just a single figure. Again, I can go into the other part of the red. And I'm going to do it up here too, this other spike. Color those there. Oops. Those are your flats. Save. Okay. Now I made a mistake of not cropping him tight enough, so normally on the cover it's going to be much smaller than this, but I can't crop it. To be very careful. Don't crop this image after you've scanned it and res it down, because you're going to res it back up and you're going to want your original scan of the line art just to be able to plop right over it. You don't want to have to be moving that thing around and lining it up. If this stays the same proportion, then great. So to make up for my mistake, I'm just going to add another layer, and I'm going to make a frame so I don't really have to worry about what's not going to show on the image. Inverse the selection, and then just fill it. Okay. I'm going to make a copy of our background. Now you can just drag it onto the little square here, and I'll make a copy. So that'll be, I'm just going to leave the eye off that. That's going to be a just reserved copy of our flats. You can also copy it, make a new channel and paste a new channel if you want. That'll be a smaller file size than to create a whole layer. But Photoshop 4 is very efficient with its layers. I wouldn't work layers too much in Photoshop 3, but from Photoshop 4 on up, I think you're good, because their memory management for that is much better. All right, I'm going to work background, foreground. Now, I always kind of think of these things as working on a painting, and Todd specified a very dramatic sort of sky, so I'm going to lay in a color back there. I'm going to use the lasso tool. I'm going to have tolerance at 0 because I have all flats now, flat colors. I just want to pick the one color, so tolerance at 0, no anti-alias. Man, just filling it with a solid color. I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Actually, I'm going to use human saturation. Darken a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and go to the gradient tool. I'm going to pick a lighter color, something maybe I got foreground to transparent on that pull. Not quite that much, so let's go ahead and drop the opacity and do that again. Yeah, that seems about right to me. I'm going to start laying in some cloud shapes. I'm going to use a brush tool, and I have specifically an airbrush brush that I've created that you guys will have on the CD too if you want to use it. It's very similar to the earlier regular Photoshop airbrushes that I used to use a lot. I'm going to pick a darker color, a little more desaturated for the cloud shapes. I'm just going to go in and start, laying in some shapes. Really kind of basic. Since these are clouds, if you wanted to, you could even, if you wanted to go really fast with your backgrounds, you could do these backgrounds at about 100 dpi or less, and just res them up because they're all sort of airbrushy, smooth skies, and they really are tolerant to that sort of re-resing. Just work on it, on a separate file and such. Again, just sort of, roughing in some shapes. I know it doesn't look like much of nothing yet, but not many art pieces do when you're starting them. You just can't get too impatient. I'm just kind of building this stuff up. There's going to be a light coming in. I'm probably going to do another layer with an effect layer. So again, we're just dealing with some clouds and stuff. And I really just want to, at this stage, get something back there that I can work with while I'm coloring the spawn figure itself. So I can know what my environmental colors are and such. More dramatic up here. Just roughing some shapes. If you don't feel very confident about doing this sort of thing, just go onto Google and go on the image section or where you can browse and search images, and just type in dramatic sky or a sunset sky or something, and you'll find some pictures there that you can use as reference. By all means, never copy and paste that stuff into the background. But looking at it and going, oh, that's how a cloud kind of works, and this kind of setup kind of helps a lot. Alrighty, I'm going to jump to the dodge tool on highlights, and I'm going to start picking out. Now I'm going to have the light coming down from straight above, so I'm going to start just picking out some highlights on top of some of these clouds to help start giving them that shape. I'm just sort of scrumbling with the dodge tool. But you can see already on these little things not doing a whole lot of anything. All of a sudden they're beginning to read like clouds with that simple highlight. clouds have shapes and forms. All these are going to be kind of a cumulus-y kind of shape. I'll play with some other things, but nice dramatic cumulus thunderhead sort of. Heavenly light coming down once I'm set with that. So all this sort of lighting I'm thinking in my head is coming from that heavenly light that I'm going to be doing a little later. But I do know essentially its direction, so I can start affecting my objects that I've created with it. Gotta be careful with the dodge tool. If you use it too much, see how that kind of what the heck is that? You want to have it on a fairly low opacity to keep control of it. I got it on 30. Again, I'm just laying in a little bit of that brightness where I'm gonna add it later. I really could call this thing finished, but I really want to go another step on it. If I hold down, by the way, the Alt key, I can make the dodge tool will then convert into the burn tool. Let me see where I'm burning up here in these dark clouds, and vice versa. All right. So now I'm going to start doing some sculpting in these clouds with the smudge tool and a fairly hard round brush. Start really kind of sculpting the heads of these guys. You can really control, you can see how I'm pulling in the highlight part a little bit. It's kind of like if you ever done oil painting or pastel or even pencil or charcoal, it's like kind of smudging that stuff around. I think it's probably most like oils and pastel though. I'm switching to the dodge tool. Again, it's kind of another head on this one cloud. I can really start adding some nice detail in here with that smudge tool. Really kind of painterly. Very pretty. Just using sort of round motion. If I go lightly over an area, back and forth, then I can sort of just begin smoothing it out, sort of like a very controlled blur at that point. You always go back to brush tool too to smooth things out. I'm holding the Alt key, so I'm picking from the colors there. Into the storm cloud. Going back to the smudge tool again. Yeah, again, I think you can really see how it really helps shape these things and give them a bit of an illusion. Same thing over here. Again, a little harsh, so I'm just going to soften enough with the brush tool. Again, just shaping this outside a bit, pulling, I can pull a little bit of the shape in there. You can get really strokey with this stuff if you want to, add a little more texture in there. And going back with the dodge tool again. Defining some of these shapes a little bit more. Dramatic sky. In 10 minutes. You can see, I mean, it kind of comes together. It's not the most perfect thing in the world, but it gives you the illusion. Okay. I think I'll feel comfortable working in this now. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start coloring the figure, and I'll jump back to the sky again later when I'm ready to do the effect on it, the heavenly light. This spawned early on, and you might see we've been doing Spawn since I think issue 41 now, and it's on issue 133 now, so we're getting close to our 100th issue anniversary on this book. When Spawn started, he was a dark blue, sort of a darker version of a Spider-Man blue. But as it kind of went on, he became more and more of a dark gray. His suit was always black, and often in comic books, blue becomes black, but we try and treat it more as dark as we can do black without losing detail in the ink. So a dark, cool gray is what I have here. I'm going to use the lasso tool. Now, what I normally do is I attack these things where I know where my light source is. There's going to be warm light coming from above, and then I'm going to have some cool, a little bit of a cool sort of reflected light, almost like, though you can't see it in the picture, that there's either snow or a pool of still calm water that he's floating over or something. But anyway, again, the idea is to be dramatic with this, so that's what I'm getting for. So I think I'm happy with this as my dark, so I'm just going to work to light. I usually work dark to light, so I'm going to leave that flat. I'm just going to go ahead with the brush tool and start laying in some basic shapes here. I'm going to pick a color that's warm, but not too. Let's see what that looks. Yeah, that looks about right. All right, and just again, I'm just sort of delineating some basic shapes here. Shape of the chest getting hit. This area getting hit with a little bit of that warm color. A little bit of that ab coming through. A little bit here. A little bit here on the thigh. A little bit of that arm. Again, kind of think of things in terms of tubes and spheres and how they're lit. A little bit here. And again, just really, really roughing in. And then I'm going to have a bit of a cool. I'm going to really kind of darken and desaturate it. And that'll be all the shadow conditions. The shadow from his head there that I'm making a little bit of a bluish underneath his pectoral, underneath his deltoid. Back here, back of the thigh. The under part of his abdomen, and back here. So that's kind of like the really unfinished, rough, non-sculpted version. Okay, then what I'll do is I'll come back in, and I'll start getting more to, think of those kind of our mid-tone highlighted. Now we're going to go more towards between the mid-tones and the highlights, and get to the highlights. And this is where I'm going to start cutting shapes of the lasso tool. The lasso tool is not anti-alias, and there's no feather on it. Though you could do that if you wanted to. I'd rather kind of keep it hard, and then I can always use a smudge tool or whatever to kind of soften it up later if I want to, and I'll show you some of that when we get to the wings. Some techniques for doing that. Anyway, let me get back to Spawn. Okay. I just hit the selection, and I just want to hit, part of it and let it fade away. I'm not trying to hit the whole shape that I'm selecting here. You want to see someone who's really good at doing that. Look at some old Vargas paintings. He was great. You can tell where he cut the shape and then just let it kind of fade off. The heads on the different muscles there. Chest. mimicking the striations that Greg and Todd did over here. And I'm not doing full hard hit. This is not the brightest that we're going to go here. I'm just going to get in a more defined mid-tone. Holding the shift key down so I can do multiple selections at once. And I'm hiding it. And the brush tool, and then hitting harder up here, and then letting it fade out. Sometimes you might want to, I have it on 50%, 57% opacity. If you're beginning with this stuff, I would probably start even lower than that, because it'll allow you to have more control. And the shapes you're cutting, think French curves, think smooth, think following the form. Again, I'm going to be light here and then a heavier hand up top. Getting some of this rib area in here. Into the thigh. There. Other thigh. Again, I'm holding the shift key. I'm going to go harder up on top of the thigh, so light is fading off. Okay. Notice I use a HSB picker. I think it's better. It's easier to pick color families this way and control your saturation and the brightness of your color. I'm going to go to brighter color now, because I want to go more like to the highlights on these areas that I cut your face to. Again, I'm going to hit harder up on top of the shape. Try to let it fade off a little bit. Top. Hard on top. That's hard. Again, I'm just kind of going with the direction of the light here. And the accent by this muscle. Sometimes you can get some very powerful effects by putting a light right next to a dark. This a little bit here. And top of the kneecap. Okay. And that's pretty much our warm colors. Now I'm going to go in and render in those reflected area lights that I talked about before. And when it's warm, kind of generally following the warm light, cool shadow, but this isn't really truly a shadow. It really is more getting a little more light than that. It's getting kind of a reflected or double light, even though it's not really a light shining on it. And it's not that bright. I'm hitting pretty lightly here with this color. Just did a quick undo there. Rib cage. Again, just kind of lightly hitting there. Now, if I find that I don't like some of it, I can always deselect it to a little bit of a darker color. I'm just gonna lightly push it back. Get a little bit underneath this jaw here. Blue color coming up. I'm going to pick back from the teeth itself. More shape. But essentially that's the Spawn body done. Sometimes it's kind of fun to look at these things without the line art. And when I do a digital painting, it really essentially is attacked a lot in a very similar way, just the level of rendering is what makes things different. I'm going to save. I should have probably done that before now. Alright, now let's go ahead and do the face mask and his arm bits, and then we'll jump to the wings. Okay. Magic wand. You'll notice that the magic wand didn't catch the whole area because I went over this bottom area of the mask with a little bit of that bluish reflective color. And since the magic wand is set to 0, it only got the gray, that is the black color. But that's okay for what I'm doing right now. Okay. I'm just going to loose airbrush the model first, then I'll go in and do my frisket cuts. Now, if you want to, I mean, you could just keep doing the airbrush as well if you don't like those cuts that people use a lot in the comic style stuff right now. You could just keep rendering with the airbrush until it's finished. A friend of mine, Drew, does a very good job of doing that. His stuff gets practically photorealistic. Alright, now I'm going to lay in some of the warm. Again, he's being hit but from light from directly above. Now I'll do some Frisket shapes. These bags of his eyes come out right about there. His cheek bones come out right about there. This arch be highlighted there. Top part of the head. A very bright color for this. Again, just going to use a light touch. Build up the color. Once you get more used to doing this, you can always go for the one stroke. That's always the optimal, is you always want to be able to do the whole thing in one stroke rather than fudging around with it. Alright, I'm going to give it a little bit that blue that I had. There you go. And I'm gonna use a little bit of a rim highlight here. Okay, I'm going to do the eyes. I started already with my base on the eyes, now I'm just going to have those reflect. Since the eyeballs are kind of hard and shiny, I'm just going to reflect some of that backgroundy color. And then the smaller selection for a smaller, brighter, harder highlight, which is something that shiny gets. Everything shiny has very small, very bright little highlights. If you're ever doing 3D work, it's cool because then you can really set up how materials work and see how they work. But it's also even better than that, have some different objects around your table while you're coloring, a metal ball or whatever, and you can see how the light works when it hits it. Again, just kind of roughing in the shape first with a quick brush. Again, the brush I have is in my airbrush mode. If you ever get lost in anything, you can always pretty much read all these. Something that's high enough resolution that you can see what's going on in most of my palettes. And pause it and you can check out exactly what the color settings are and what layer I'm on and blah blah blah, all that stuff. His bracers have become more and more and more sort of, I don't want to say distressed, but they're definitely textural. But I'm just following again what they have there. And I'll do some brighter ones as well. I see this thing have this arm part having a little bit of a sheen to it. Not a lot, but just a little bit. There. Okay. Let's do the other one. Again, just kind of lightly. Again, that shape would be kind of a tube shape if you had to think of it that way. I'm holding the shift key down again, that's how you get the multiple selections. I'm going to go a little brighter. And some ones right along the highlight area. Oh, that looked nice. The hands need a little bit. I'm just going to do a couple quick things because they're mostly black. So I really don't need to do hardly anything to them. Just going to pick a little bit of that warm color. Hit them. Do a quick. Pick another highlight color from something I've already done. I'm just eyedropping it. Okay, let's do his spikes. The spikes, Greg already drew a horizon line. Anything that's sort of reflected and shiny, horizon line is the key to making it work. If you want to see some nice illustrated reference for metal, you can always look at Jaime Shirayama's work is wonderful, or look at some real chrome. But anyway, so it's going to be warm on top, cool on the bottom. Do the warm part now. And do the cool part. And then if you want that to play as metal, you want to do a little hard highlight. I'm almost going to go to white. Well, you see how that automatically gives a little bit of a gleam and a little bit, again, changes the surface texture. Because who would want soft spikes? Huh? Again, I'm picking that base color and I'm bringing up the saturation a little bit, bringing up the brightness to get that harder highlight color that I'm hitting. Alrighty. Alright, Spawn himself is now done. Let's go ahead and attack the wings. Alright, I want them to be more of a off-white. Let me kill that. Move my swatches up here. Alright. Something like that. I'll delete. And is that going to work for my base? No, I want to be a little bit more like that. It's too peachy at the moment. I don't want it to be so peachy. Alright, I can make that work. Okay. Now again, I'm just going to hide the selection and then with my tool in the airbrush mode. I'm going to start sculpting out this area. Spawn's going to have a cast shadow, so I'm going to hit that now. This is the shadow from Spawn's body, but then the rest of it's just also the shadows from where the wings are. And again, this is kind of just getting the general shape. Okay, we're going to have him hit from behind with a little bit of a cool blue in that shadow condition that's in this cast shadow. It's kind of a dramatic thing. And you'll see how as it gets rendered, it'll fit even better. Alright, let's go ahead and start putting in our Now I'm just going to go ahead and start selecting a bunch of wing shapes. Not too small, I'm hitting pretty much the full shape of each little feather. So I'm going to go in with a lighter color next. Okay. Again, I'm letting them fade off as they kind of go away from the light. Holding the shift key, doing multiple selections. If you're beginning doing this, I might not do as many selections as I'm doing right now. I kind of know where I'm going with it. There's one big feather right here. Hide the selection. Again, I don't want to hit the whole thing. I mean, if I hit the whole thing, I think it's a little too strong. So I just want to kind of, hint at the shapes and let them fade off. I think that's much more interesting. You always hit the Alt key and remove part of a selection if you don't think it's working. Again, these are still kind of general shapes. I'm going to do a little blurring to this afterwards, but I'll show you how that works. A little bit bigger brush. I think you should always, that's something we didn't talk about before, when you're working, have your preferences set on brush size so you can see the size of your brush. If you're just working with a little crosshair tool, I think you really can't control it as well. Okay, I'm going to do the parts that are getting hit next to the cast shadow. Do the other side. Too many feathers on this piece. That's okay. I'm going to fade these out, but I need to have something there for when I fade out. And you'll notice also the line art doesn't continue down there, but it looks kind of weird without any kind of hint of feathers. So I'm going to add them even though they're not there in the line art. But again, I'm just going to let it fade. Hit it harder up on top and let it fade out on the bottom. And zoom out every once in a while to see how everything is working together. I'm going to go ahead and save. Again, still using the brush tool. The closer you're in, from 66% to 100%, the smoother your selections will be. If you want to color farther out and your hand's a little jittery, if you still want smooth selections, you can set up selections to be smooth with just a punch action. One of your keys, you can set it up whatever, smoothing 2 pixels, 1 pixels, whatever. I often do that if I'm going fast and I know I'm going to be coloring zoomed out. Since we're really coloring for screen size here, it's okay. Hard selection, brush tool, harder on the top part where the light is, and then losing it as it goes down. Okay. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and deciding what I need to do next. Start doing the some wing shapes or feather shapes in here. Holding the shift key again so I can grab a bunch of them. You know, I wouldn't use the anchored lasso for this because it takes too long. You don't really need that. Again, we're kind of throwing shapes that just are hinting at feathers. They're not exactly feathers. You know, half of the art of this stuff is really just getting the symbols and what makes the eye kind of, oh, okay, those are feathers, you know. They're not exactly feathers, okay, but they make you think of feathers, so that's what we're after. Again, I'm just going to let it fade off. Same thing on this side. Press the wrong key. I only have actually very few history stages set up on this, and so I don't want to have that option to jump too far back. I think you have to make a commitment when you're doing this stuff. If you have too many undos, it gets in the way. Now watch me do some sort of catastrophic accident where I need to have many undos and eat my words. Okay, I'm just going to generally block in this one area where they have such a bunch of negative rendering, so I'm not going to go in there and render the little hair things, but I'm going to put some color behind it. Okay. Carry that color. Let's see, do we still have the selection? No. Going to our flat so I can get those wings again. Looking back onto my background layer. Start bringing in some cool color down here. Okay, start doing these shapes down here. Again, the idea is just trying to follow the forms that the guys have set up already. You don't want to fight against that ink line. You want to complement it. Or pencil line, depending on what you're coloring. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit more of a highlight pass now through the wings. Smaller Friscuits than the first pass. So we'll add another layer of detail to the appearance of the wings. Pick that color I have already, put it all the way to 100% brightness and almost to white. Even brighter. More shapes. Okay. Okay. See, by going really hard right next to that shadow, kind of emphasizes the shadow. Okay. Okay, again with the airbrush tool, go up. A lot of rendering going on in these wings. Okay, but we're almost there. And we can go next to our fine-tuning our background and our heavenly light effect. If you guys have any questions that maybe I go over or just skip or something or you missed, on the website www.digitalarttutorials.com, it's also on the package for the CD. There's a message board. You can always ask questions. I usually get on, I try my best to do weekly, but it's pretty close to that regardless. And you can ask me whatever question, whatever you have there. Okay, that looks good. Well, better. He's looking a little bit more angelic to me. I'm going to do another quick pass at these feathers. I'm going to do some other, well, you'll see. The bluey ones. Again, this is the idea of just getting a little bit of reflected light. It's not a strong blue, it's kind of a nice little pale blue. A little more saturated, a little brighter. It depends what you're coloring, but that's a general good rule of thumb. Okay, now I'm going to want to fade some of these as they go down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these feathers. I'm going to copy it, paste, and I'm going to Gaussian blur. Okay. Then I'm going to go with erase and kind of gently go between the focus feathers and the unfocus, and just letting them kind of towards the bottom. I want them to get softer. Nice and soft. This was before, and that's after. It just kind of softens them up a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and just merge that layer down into my background layer. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Control C, Control V, or Command. And then I can just do the same blur because it saves it up here. And then I'll do the same thing with just erasing back a little bit towards the top. Then I'll fade off towards the bottom. Merge that down. Okay. Now Todd has the splatter effect, so I'm just going to do a loose selection here and bring my background color up into that. Yep. Should be going more towards the cool, so it's Go ahead and separate out this wing a little bit more, like there's some haze going in there, and that will justify that splatter a little bit more. Fix this by adding, holding the shift key. There we go. Helps pull that wing forward too by doing this. I'm going to go over the top of the line art there in a little bit, not right now. So, all right, we are very close. Let's go ahead and save again. Alrighty, all right, let's work on our heavenly light. All right, so I'm going to do another layer above the line art layer. This layer will be in screen mode. And I'm just going to do some rays of light. These are going to be the bigger rays of light and the more subtle ones. You'll see they will look quite hard. Pardon me for hitting the mic. They'll look quite hard to begin with, but since they're on a layer, we have infinite control over them. So I'm going to hide them. We'll pick kind of an orangey color. We go to the grad tool. Foreground to transparent is how it's set up. I'm just going to pull it down. Okay. Now you're going to go, oh, that's too hard, but stay with me. Okay. I'm going to do smaller hits. I get a brighter color. I may hit that again. We're just going to see how this comes out first. Yeah, we're going to hit that again, a little bit brighter still. Okay. Now again, you're thinking, that's no way to do that. Well, there's a method to my madness. What I'm going to do now, make sure you don't have it selected anymore. Go Filter, Blur. Let's go Motion Blur. I just want to soften it up. That's kind of nice. So let's go with that. Okay. I'm going to just hit a big shot up here where the light is coming out of the clouds. I'm going to put this behind spawn, but in the meantime, I'm just going to kind of make sure it's coming out all nice. And I like putting in little bits of kind of like dust motes or whatever you want to call them, just because they add to the, so it's not just a clean, pristine sort of, there's something in the air. Okay. Now I want to put that behind him, so I'm going to make a layer mask for it. So I'm going to go back to our wonderful flats. Another good reason to have flats. Okay. Yeah, be careful when you're too zoomed out. Sometimes you won't see details. Let's see if there's anything I'm missing. If there's anything I am missing, I can always just, oops, snag it. Inverting that selection, and I'm making it my layer mask. So there, now the light is behind Spawn. Now I'm going to take off, there's a little lock here that puts the mask and the color behind it, but I want to play with the portions of that light. And by taking that off, my layer mask doesn't move with it. Like, well, oops. I was on my Okay. I just want to narrow it up a little bit, maybe turn it a little bit. See the control you have? It's really nice. Okay. We just can do one undo to see if you like it better. Yeah, I like that better. Okay. Make my sky be a little darker up toward the top, so I'm gonna go ahead and put in some dark clouds back there. Okay. And we are pretty much done. I noticed down here on the effect when I moved it, I caught an edge, so I'm just going to go ahead with the erase tool and just get rid of that, let it fade off. In the original piece that I colored, I had a couple darker clouds up on top that were breaking through, and what I might do if I was gonna play with that would be take another layer and put some dark clouds on top of this area, but I kind of like it this way too. I'm just going to go in and tweak the clouds a little bit so I have a little bit of the dodge tool, so I have a little bit of that rim lighting. Help define that shape coming out of the clouds. Now, I'm kind of doing the quick job of this. Normally I would take a little more time than I'm doing now, but we have so much space on these CDs. I'm going to include the original piece that I did with this PSD so you can see some of the different choices I made this time around. Okay. Let me go ahead and save. And when we come back, I'm going to res this thing up and put on line art. Okay, we're going to res up the piece and do a couple of tweakings on the high res, because sometimes you notice things. But let's res it up first so we can put our high res black line back on. So we're going to go to image size. I'm going to go 300 dpi. Bicubics will give you the smoothest up-resing. So we'll do that. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to take a little bit, because again, I'm just on a Pentium 3 on this. So I'm going to actually pause the recording now, and so you guys don't have to sit and watch this thing. Okay, it's all resed up now, so I'm going to open up our original scan of the line art. Control A or Command A, Command C to copy the whole thing. Paste it in. Command or Control V. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that low res layer line art. I'm going to put this in multiply mode. I'm going to get rid of my flats because I don't really need them anymore. Now there's a couple tweaks that I wanted to do, well, a couple things I could only do with the high-res line art. You'll notice, let me go in closer. See this area here where the effect that's from the light is going to the line art up here too, in the feathers, because we use the color flats as our mask on that layer. So what we're going to do is be in the line art layer, and I'm going to select the black little line art. I'm going to select similar so we get it all. I'm going to go into the mask channel. Notice I'm hitting on the mask, not the color part. And you can tell that too where you get the little circle mask symbol in the box there. And I'm going to Alt-Delete the black. And you can see now all the feathers are back and everything. Now you can only do that with the high-res line art because if you do it with the low res with the anti-alias when it comes up, and it won't exactly match anymore. So that's the way you do that. The other thing I wanted to do was I'm going to make another layer, and I wanted to knock back the line art down here. Where his splatter is. The computer doesn't like working on this thing at 300 dpi. It's a little underpowered for it. Okay, so there I just kind of knocked back that line art just a little bit by going over the top. Alright. And that's pretty close to it. I'm going to flatten this now. If we were going to print, depending on how the printing is done, sometimes you can go ahead and just flatten this and CMYK it. But that's going to be a whole other thing. I'm going to try and put that sort of more technical documents on the website for you, and on the CD and the frequently asked documents. I'm not going to go through CMYKing this. But if you want to send it off to print as an inkjet or a Giclée or whatever, you can always just right here, just flatten image. Go Pentium 3, go! Alrighty. I'm going to crop that frame out that I was using because I didn't crop my line art to begin with. Let's use the crop tool. And the only other thing I want to try, last final touch. I switch my brush tool to smooth and hard, opacity up to 100. And I just want to kind of have his line art up here be affected. A little bit of a rim light sort of thing on his shoulders and in the feathers. Maybe too much, but again, I just, want to try it, so let's try it. It either works or it doesn't. And since we got in a layer, I can always undo it or tone it down or whatever. I'm going to hit the feather tops as well. I'm going to go a little sloppy because I'm going quick. Just want to see how this is all kind of working. I can always go back in and clean it up, with erasing and using the smudge tool. Just hitting the area that would pretty much be hit by it. And getting some flyaways in there. There's kind of feathery shapes. And again, you can see if I use the smudge tool, I can really kind of wisp out these edges just by pulling them. And we got a little out of control. Squash that back down. Just lightly hitting them. Really getting them to pull out to those nice little points. Go ahead and go back to my airbrush mode, soften up a little bit of this. See if a screen mode makes this work a little better. Yeah, it brightens it up a little bit more. And there you go. And it's either too much or it's good. I might continue it down a little bit more on that side. But anyway, it was just an idea. I'm going to go ahead and finally save this. I'm going to save it as a layer file just so you guys can see how that works. I'm going to do spawn. Sure. The other thing that you might want to play with on your own after you do a piece like this is at the end you can always do a little levels and see if it needs a little more contrast, a little less, That's a good way to pop a piece. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a fun piece to do. And we're going to have a lot more. We're going to do digital inking, some 3D stuff, digital painting, you name it. So please stay tuned to our next set of tutorials. Thanks.